All right, welcome back, everyone. For the folks that are here in the room and that are watching us online to the 2024 International Firefighter Cancer Symposium. So I know we're digesting lunch right now, but we have a really exciting group of presenters now for the afternoon session. It turns out the fire service is made up of many different types of firefighters, not just our structural firefighters, but a broad family of different subgroups, including our urban search and rescue firefighters. Increasing attention has been paid to our urban search and rescue firefighters who have very unique exposures when responding to hazmat and very interesting fire responses. We put together two members to be able to talk and give us an update on cancer in the fire service as it relates to rapid disaster response and urban and search and rescue. Two speakers for us this afternoon, Dr. Benjamin Abo, who's an accomplished EMS and emergency physician, a toxicologist, and assistant professor at Florida State University School of Medicine, based out of Naples, Florida. His multifaceted career includes serving as a medical director for several fire service rescues, urban search and rescue teams, and venom response units across Florida, including Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, Florida Task Force 1, USAR. With a global footprint in EMS, wilderness, and Austrian EMS, and emergency medicine, Dr. Abo contributes to philanthropy, consulting, and media, having worked with Shark Week, National Geographic, and more. On a personal, Dr. Abo was instrumental in supporting us as we, the Firefighter Cancer Initiative, provided direct support to the Surfside building collapse, and thanks to his leadership, we were able to support the firefighters that are there. Our second panelist, before you clap, but our second panelist is Lieutenant Christopher Pecori, who I like to call Dr. Christopher Pecori because he is a full-fledged scientist now working in the lab, helping us advance our science through the Firefighter Cancer Initiative. But his day job is that he serves as a lieutenant with Miami-Dade Fire Rescue and holds a pivotal role with us as the clinical research coordinator with IFF Local 1403, a partnership with the Firefighter Cancer Initiative. His extensive involvement spans various specialized units with MDFR, including hazardous material, technical rescue, dive teams, air rescue, and venom response unit. In fact, he was just on national news extricating a snake the size of my full body and saving some folks from there. We're very blessed and thankful to have both of them. Please join me giving a warm round of applause to Dr. Abo and Lieutenant Pecori.
Good afternoon, everybody. I guess we're the lucky ones that drew the short straw for the post-prandial first lecture. So we'll try and keep you entertained here. So what I want to do is I just want to, there we go. So we'd like to share some of the hazards that our disaster responders encounter that may not be as apparent to all. The work that many of you do for the fire service cancer awareness and prevention extends over to our other emergency providers. We both have been responding to these events for over the past 20 years and have seen the changes in the way we care for our professionals as a direct response from your studies. So we only have a brief amount of time, so we've highlighted a few observations from hazards that have been encountered by us on a few of our deployments, such as an earthquake, a hurricane, and a building collapse. We both participate on the FEMA USAR team. We've both been on the federal government's, I've been on the trauma critical care team. He was on the DMAT, the disaster medical assistance team. So just a warning, some of these images are from real disasters and you may find them a little bit graphic, but let's see if this is gonna work. So as far as when I talk about the disaster responders, I'm only covering the government agencies. There are hundreds of NGO, non-government organizations. So FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, has the USAR task force, which are staffed predominantly by fire department personnel, but they're supplemented with civilian individuals such as our canine handlers and our engineers. The Health and Human Services, which is on the other branch of the federal side, has several teams, as I said, such as DMAT, the TCCT, DMORT, and I'll go over the acronyms, they love them, which are staffed by medical providers that act similar to the National Guard, where they're primarily only respond when a team is activated. Otherwise, they work in their regular day jobs in the hospitals. So go back one. There we go. There are, hang on. See if I got it right here. So there are 28 USAR task forces throughout the U.S. The task forces were started in the early 90s following the 1985 Mexico City earthquake, where Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, where I work, and Fairfax County Fire Rescue sent teams on their own. Following that event, that's kind of the evolving where they decided and developed the task forces. So the task forces will bring a search and rescue component, which includes specialized equipment and canine teams. In addition, a technical component, which is structural engineers, swift water and hazardous material technicians, and a medical capabilities including physicians, paramedics, and a full complement of medical equipment and pharmaceutical cache. And there's kind of the summary. As far as our DMAT, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has 80 DMAT teams, disaster medical assistance teams spread out amongst the U.S. and its territories. They provide emergency care and staffing to affected areas. So examples such as a hurricane, a tornado, flooding where resources are limited, they'll set up a temporary emergency care facility, like a temporary ER at a remote site out of tents. Or recently with the COVID-19 pandemic, they actually would provide staffing to medical facilities that are overwhelmed by the pandemic and to help augment their hospital and medical staff. This is just a picture of one of the DMAT deployments. And the Trauma Critical Care Team, this was formerly known as IMCIRT, which was International Medical Surgical Response Team. They had the capability to set up a critical care unit in the field or remote operating rooms. So they can be deployed alone or in addition to DMAT teams to augment their capabilities. And I went with this team when it was IMCIRT to Haiti, and that's one of the ones I'm going to kind of go over. And then you got your disaster mortuary operational response teams. There's 10 of those throughout the country, and they're comprised of coroners, funeral directors, forensic pathologists, medical examiners. They respond to large-scale events where there's significant loss of life affecting, and they assist with tracking and documenting human remains and create temporary morgues. And in the Haiti event, when there was about 300,000 estimated deaths, they were a vital component to that, especially when the infrastructure of that country was just demolished. So when I go into it, on January 12th, 2010, at approximately 5 p.m., there was a 7.0 magnitude earthquake that hit Haiti, approximately 20 miles from Port-au-Prince, which is their capital. It's got about 3 million people, which is about a third of the entire country. So FEMA and Health and Human Service, along with multiple other countries, sent disaster assistant teams and responders. This image is in Giesco Field, an old school, where the Trauma Critical Care Team set up a medical facility. It included 2 fully operating rooms and an ICU, and we were all working out of tents. It was a prime location. As you can see, the structure with the open courtyard provided some security, and we're not in any of the structures, which were all compromised from the earthquake. Right next to the structure, you can see there's a tent city, which had estimated about 1,200 displaced locals. So one of the hazards we encountered were these constant aftershocks. I had never been in an earthquake before, and we had 2 or 3 aftershocks every day. This was a big one. It was about a 6.0. So these essentially we would drop everything, meet in the center, take a head count, and then kind of continue back on just to ensure our safety and stay away from the remaining structure that was always at risk for further collapse. So we had limited facilities resulting in poor sanitation conditions. Fortunately, like the MREs, if you've ever eaten those, the meal ready to eat food, it's very constipating, so we didn't have to use it that much. Our sleeping quarters were limited, just as any hospital medical facility that has to be maintained 24 hours. So we had to hot swap our beds. So essentially what you would do is the day staff would get up in the morning, take their bedding off, put it underneath the cot. The night staff would come in and set their bed up and sleep in it during the daytime. So the bugs were relentless. We actually had a CDC consult while we were there. They told us these were mosquito bites. I lived in South Florida a long time, and these don't look like any mosquito bites I've ever had. So we kind of came up with our own bug killer. So we slowly got modern features. You can see here we developed our own washer, dryer, and shower. You just had to bring your own bottled water to soap and rinse. So the locals burn their garbage and waste everywhere. So this led to horrible air quality, especially at night when there was no wind and the smoke would just settle on the ground. So it actually became very difficult to, say, even breathe at night. And you can see, as I noted, there was an estimated 300,000 deaths. The majority of these facilities in the country were destroyed, paralyzing their ability to manage the amount of human remains. This is where our DMORT came in as a vital component. So due to the lack of healthcare resources, even prior to the earthquake, disease is prevalent, and tuberculosis is reportedly very common there. So in a U.S. hospital, we would put a tuberculosis patient in a negative pressure room and start treatment. As you can see here, we don't have those options, and we had to improvise. So here you can see we take for granted in our healthcare system, how something as simple as our vaccinations can prevent these horrific mortality and morbidity events. So here you can see a young man second in there who was stricken by tetanus, also known as lockjaw. It's caused by a bacterium Clostridium tetani. I'd never seen this. I've been practicing emergency medicine as a physician assistant for 27 years. Never seen a case in the U.S. It's very rarely seen due to our vaccination regimen. But they have no access to this. So tetanus is estimated, when I looked it up, around 50,000 people worldwide. It's only one to two people reported in the U.S. that succumb to this. Again, because of our ability with our access to our health care. So every country has its crime rate. Haiti, due to its political and economic instability, has widespread gang violence and vigilantism. So during disasters, some see it as an opportunity, obviously. This young man was suspected of looting, suffered a load of bird shot from a shotgun. So we did have the National Guard as a security force for our detail, but here we are removing lead shot from him. So as you can see, there are many hazards we face on these deployments, as I noted, from the disaster or event itself, exposure to disease and pollutants, violent crimes, and sleep deprivation, as it takes a toll on us all mentally. These are just a few examples of the various hazards encountered by our disaster responders. As we work with FCI and dive deeper into this field, we appreciate all of the work you do in finding better ways to protect us, discover our disease earlier, and develop enhanced treatments to allow us to continue to perform our duties. So, as I've said this before, and to concur with Eric's, I consider you guys our heroes. So I'm going to turn it over for the next two events to my colleague.
Thank you. See, now I'm dropping the remote. So as Chris said, it's not very simple. It's not that firefighters are only going to get hurt by fires and burning buildings. It's not that police officers are going to die from lead poisoning, being shot at, things like that. It's very complicated, especially in the different roles. It's often said that if you've seen one EMS system, you've seen one EMS system. And so you can see with all the different roles, Chris and I are, as he said, are on these teams that have a number of different roles. And when a disaster comes, we're all there to do our parts. As said, we have the critical care, we have DMAT, the hospitals. The pictures that he showed was actually after Hurricane Katrina. I was originally on PA1 for DMAT. I was deployed twice. And at that point, DMAT was actually under FEMA, but everyone said, where's FEMA, where's FEMA? So then we were getting shot at, right? So we're the people that are coming in to help. We're firefighters, we're paramedics, we're nurses and physicians and PAs trying to come in and help, and we're getting shot at. So that's why we actually always have force protection now on every single deployment. So it gets pretty complicated. A few years ago, Hurricane Dorian was looking like it was going to strike first. We'd just gotten over Hurricane Maria, right? Did I say it correctly? Hurricane Maria. So we actually went on deployment to Puerto Rico to prep for that, and it didn't hit. So we come back home to Florida to help protect Florida with a number of other state teams, and it didn't really hit Florida, because what did it do? It just sat on the Bahamas for multiple days. Winds up to 185 miles an hour. There is no Category 6 hurricane, but it might as well be one, right? And it just sat on there. So when we were cleared to go, we were waiting for FEMA to get the okay from the president to send the international teams to go over to the Bahamas. But we put together between Miami-Dade Fire Rescue and the city of Miami Fire Rescue, we put together, I called us Task Force 305 because we represented. And I was the one physician for it. Chris was there also. And we went over to go and help. right? So it just sat over for almost 2 days, greater than 157 miles an hour, many gusts, sustained gusts over 185 miles up to, and it just sat there and annihilated things. But it's not just the winds that you have to worry about, right? You could see here, the wind speeds just annihilated entire villages, entire towns, right? But also the surge would pick up entire roadways. Imagine the asphalt being picked up plus 7 feet further down, just lifted a mile and a half away. We saw very similar storm surge issues where I live now on Southwest Florida with Hurricane Ian, right? So entire things down to the foundation, or even the foundation moved. Crude oil, right? We're going around, we're reconning the island, we're trying to see what was going on. Basically, we're doing reconnaissance, search and gather information, damage assessments, and try to find the hazards. And we came across this huge swath of oil. So this is not burned land, this is all crude oil that was leaked, right? So we would stop their oil tanks to the side, which doing air recon, you can see some of the tanks here. This is Chris and I and one of the firefighters from the city of Miami. We're putting the drone up to try to get a hazard look at things. And you can see again from the air, the crude oil basins just kind of ripped off the top. Let's see the video. So there's Chris with the meter on the side, and I was looking at, because of the hydrocarbons and the benzene and stuff, I call that the beep of death. Basically, it kept beeping off, warning that there's a lot of volatility, that things could have gone up in air, right? So this is a satellite image from a day before the hurricane hit and after. It looks like whack-a-mole, just kind of came or, popped the stress bubbles. And you can see even in this picture the crude oil. This crude oil actually leaked down into their water supply. They are all on spring water, and to this day still have to use bottled water. I filmed for Shark Week. We're in the Bahamas a lot because there's a lot of sharks there, and we have to make sure that for safety-wise, we're still drinking bottled water, right? So we have a lot of the same situations, but also different in terms of sanitation, sleep issues, air quality, hazardous materials, infestations, lots of wildlife and things, violent crimes, and theft, right? And then, of course, the mental stability and sleep hygiene. There's an article on the first slide of Hurricane Dorian. It was a quote in the Miami Herald. When I was interviewed, they're like, where are you going to stay when you're there? I'm like, I don't know. I'm bringing my hammock in case there's any trees left standing. But I didn't know where we were going to be. Where I ended up sleeping was actually in the stairwell of a fire escape, and I put my hammock up there. So that's the hurricane. That's actually the bread and butter of our deployments for the most part in terms of FEMA and urban search and rescue. But then Surfside happened. Building collapse. This wasn't from an earthquake. This was based on construction. This was right here. And this was absolutely a month that's going to forever be with me, and I can only hope that it's not in terms of cancers and whatever I was exposed to. We had initial, obviously, reports. It went out as a water flow alarm, right? And we initially got engine 76 was on scene first. And you have people like David Bell there in the green helmet climbing up. This is to the equivalent of the 3rd floor to pick this kid up and carry him down, right, to safety, right? We had work to do. There was not a burning fire yet or anything. What don't you see on these gentlemen? Respirators, right? But we did what we had to do. After several hours in the middle of the night when things kind of started to calm down, this is from the beachside view, but we had to come up with a game plan. And some of these pictures, again, all this is either from the media or they're PIO approved, but you can see a little map in the top right corner, and I tried to put in so you can tell the view from where in the building these pictures were. But at this point, we were clearing everything inside, and we had the structural engineers underneath in the garage to try to look and make sure the building wasn't going to come down on us, because you already see half the building down just pancaked, and that's where we're here to voice, a young female, right? So we actually spent several hours trying to find her. talking to her through the wall. When you walk in through underneath here, under the tape, this is actually a pool deck that had collapsed straight down, and you walk right into this garage. That's where you walk in the garage and you bank a right, 90-degree turn, and there's water up to my knees, debris underneath, right? And walking in all this water next to Teslas was very concerning to me. But you go down and you can see all the lights here down in the bottom right. This is trying to walk through. And we weren't doing digging at this point, but it bypassed all of us that we needed to do something, right? And so it was limited. By the time I got in here, the guys were already at this point talking to her, trying to get through. And I'm looking around like, you guys don't even have N95 masks on or our respirators, right? So we talked to her for hours until we were pushed outside from a fire. But we were trying. We had cameras, we had microphones, we're talking to her until she wasn't talking anymore, bringing the live search dog, ultimately bringing the cadaver dog until we were forced out. But while we're downstairs in the garage, 10 floors straight above us, same. You know, not knowing if the building was going to come down, not knowing all the exposures that were kind of going on because we had our mind on a mission, right? So we continued going through with things until we were forced out for a fire that we were trying to control. Again, this is us with some of the cameras and the sound equipment trying to go through, and finally realizing that we need our respirators on. But having everyone take that line, we were out waiting for the fire to pass so that we can go inside to be cleared, and you can see what's on their elbows, their masks. But you're gonna see here what some of the air quality was, and we were just all waiting to work, right? Including our four-legged companions. Going back in after the fire, and we all know about the carcinogens and everything, this hole you can see is actually through a mattress that had burned from the fire, and we were cutting through trying to get to this girl. So we're down here under the rubble there, and on top of things up here were Widowmakers. 5 to 6 extremely large air conditioning units, and who knows what other tanks and other chemicals within that were hanging by literally threads. Going through all the debris, and we were picking and choosing through part of things. This is actually a nursery that we got to. You can see a lot of kid clothes. And what we would basically do is when we found where there were human remains, we would carefully take care of things, put on the full Tyvek suits. Everyone was in respirators throughout the search and moving the debris around. But then we would put the body or the remains. And you can tell, obviously, June, you know, it's very different, the weather and how long the capabilities would be. It actually started to remind me about when we were deployed to earthquake in Haiti, where the refrigeration trucks for the morgue lost power. I will never forget that smell. We set up a forward boo, Chris and I and our medical team. So this is a tent so we can help take care of our crew members or anyone else that we had pulled out, and all set up cots, but most of the time it was taking care of sleep whenever we could. This is a physician from Indiana, right? We were working 12-hour shifts, switching between all of our members, first the state teams, and then Task Force 1 and 2 state as federal teams and other states came in. Brad from Pennsylvania. And the only time for 30 days that I actually slept not in a chair or on the back seat of a state trooper car was the one cot in the thing, but I couldn't let go either. And I've definitely learned from this. I couldn't let go, and you see 2 radios and 2 cell phones next to my head, and a list of the people that I was concerned about that I wanted to keep checking on. The girl who we were never able to get to throughout, you can see Pennsylvania 1, myself, we were trying to figure out, and I knew we were close because where we were getting through with debris. We even talked to our engineer who first heard her voice, and we were thinking, hey, you know, if she was here and we were here, she said she was on the 3rd floor, we're down the basement, where could have found, and we knew we were getting close. Right? And having to do this and communicate all this, again, through the respirators, remind people, put on your iPro, put on your respirations. right? And then we did finally find and had that closure. And right next to my foot, when we found her, I could look down and those are the same struts that were in the garage holding things up in case the building came down on us. Emotionally, it was very tough for everybody. Survivors, family survivors, firefighters. By the way, our sleeping quarters for Task Force 1 and 2, South Florida and Metro-Dade, Urban Search and Rescue, was across the street on the tennis courts. Our team was midnight to noon, so at noon trying to sleep with a memorial on the other side of our fence, with crying and screaming and the noises of everything, adds up to everything. And how is that going to do with our already exposures to other things? In the first several hours, I had come across a photo on the ground, and I didn't know what it was from, but I knew it might have been from survivors or maybe the only remnants of family members or things. It was obviously something from a Jewish synagogue, maybe a bar mitzvah, maybe a wedding, I don't know. But we started collecting the photographs and other identifying things, trying to maybe reunite them later. Overall, I had a great medical team. We had the other teams that came through. You can see Chris and I both there, and Dr. Lieberman, my other medics. From all the different teams from Urban Search and Rescue, these were the complaints that we were dealing with from all the workers. This also includes my heavy machinery operators, the crane operators, who, they just do construction. They're not supposed to do this kind of work. We dealt with a lot of different things: trench foot lacerations, crush injuries, all the different things, eye injuries, corneal abrasions, heat stroke, a lot of different stuff. And as was mentioned before, we did some initial research immediately. And some of the things that we were exposed to, with the methylethyl bad stuff, and I'm using the good word, right? I swear, it's like the more syllables, it's like as a physician, I learned that the more syllables I can bill more to insurance. The more syllables this methylethyl bad stuff is, there's a lot of syllables here. And this is high exposure, and the more pink and purple is higher things. And you can see that white filter that's supposed to be pure white, 1 block west versus on the site, and even we had particles 6 blocks away in the air. So ongoing, all those things, when you're talking about overhaul and different things like that and different exposures, we don't know, the worst is yet to come, is what I really fear. And afterwards, with Task Force 6 and which I'm a local asset for, and Task Force 1, I don't know what it's going to be. I went and did my heavy metal testing and things. I don't know what's going to ultimately happen, right? So we have, depending on the situation, a building collapse, hurricane, tornado, and you can have building collapses and fires and everything on top of all of these natural disasters. The risks are just, the scary part is we don't know what we don't know yet. And so that's why, as we all said, you guys are all heroes for taking part so we can help take care of other people. I rely on you to help me navigate so I can mitigate these risks. I do urge, I should have put a QR code for it. There's an article that I wrote about emergency services for safety third, because we see signs all over, safety first, safety first. But equating it to, if you Google safety isn't first and we all know it, is an article that I wrote about firefighters and EMS. Because if safety was really our first priority, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. That's the fact. Someone needs help, whether they're family or a stranger, we're going in, right? So we go through a lot of different things, and Surfside is definitely one that I've learned a lot from. I'll always remember, but I learned from every one of these disasters, every one of these deployments. And with that, I saw the 5-minute sign just 2 minutes ago. One's my contact information, and one of them is the QR code for an article, at least about Surfside from my perspective, kind of a photojournal. But no matter the disaster, no matter where in the world, we're going to have these things, we're going to have these exposures, and we have to get people to realize that we can do things to mitigate these things, right? So I appreciate everyone being here. And with that, I appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
Yes.
Hello.
I have a question regarding your search and rescue. There is a heartbeat finder developed by the military to actually locate people under collapsed buildings, and I have heard about them used in other earthquakes or other building collapses. Are you familiar with the systems? Are they actually work, or is it just...
So we are familiar with the systems, and we incorporate some of the same. So you saw we had cameras with special, but we also have microphones, special sound we'll put and look for vibrations and all. I've seen them use in other things. We do train with some of these devices as well. That was some of what was incorporated in this for Surfside. But unfortunately, most of the collapse was pancake, which is very unlikely to survive.
Well, thank you for these messages from the depths of hell. Can I ask one very practical question, and particularly with respect to Haiti? In situations like that, when do you leave? Because once you withdraw, the entire healthcare system leaves with you.
Yes.
So the Health and Human Services, I was there for 3 weeks. It's usually a 2-week deployment. They were opting, anyone who wanted to stay longer could. I could only endure about another week, and I had to go, just mentally, physically. It's taxing, it's hot, it's, the MREs and everything. But they cycled teams in and out of there. I want to say it was about 4 months, and we left all of our equipment there. So all of our life packs, all of our OR equipment, we literally walked away and left it there for them.
And similarly, I was in Haiti from a DMAT perspective. Again, we left things through. I actually went home, and then I was in medical school at the time. I was on the team as a paramedic. But I rotated back another 2 times afterwards.
Yeah, to just comment on Dr. Tigadoti's question, I was in Haiti. I responded with Florida Task Force 1. So we were there for the 2 weeks that our deployment usually lasts. Back then, they held us to 2 weeks, so we stayed to 2 weeks. Now, like Dr. Abu has said, sometimes they get extended to another 2 weeks, and that's strictly on a voluntary basis. But when we arrived in Haiti, our cash didn't arrive. And the Port-au-Prince airport was close to cargo planes. So when we hit the ground, we really started search and rescue ops blind. And it was with whatever we had brought with us on the cargo plane that brought the task force. The equipment didn't arrive until a day or 2 later, if I recall. But to answer your question is, we carried out search and rescue operations, and then immediately the goal is to turn it over to local government. So if you respond within the United States, you respond under the auspices of FEMA, and if you respond internationally, you respond under the auspices of USAID, United States Agency for International Development. FEMA has designated international teams. Florida 1 used to be one. It is no longer for whatever reasons. You can have your speculations as to why. Many people say for political reasons. I'm not here to debate that. But the reason why we went to Haiti, it was because of the proximity and our experience being an international team. We left when the 2 weeks were up, and like Chris said, Chris deployed with DMORT, if I remember correctly, HHS.
Yeah.
I deployed with DHS, USAID, and we did the same thing. We inventoried all of our medical cash, and we turned it over to local government.
Chris, Ben, I have a question. How does the training and education of USAR firefighters, how does that address cancer prevention or risk mitigation? Is it ever discussed?
Yeah, so when you're onboarded, there's a lot of computer-based classes, and we have to consistently renew our training in terms of hazardous materials and methyl bad stuff in response to different type stuff. It used to be just considered the WMD, but it's Saberni overall, weapons of mass destruction versus all the chemical, biological. And we have the full cash to protect ourselves as much as possible, but to still be that Swiss Army knife and kind of get in and deal with it. And then otherwise, it's up to people like Chris and I to really make sure that we're doing it. We have hazmat techs that are specifically there to help us mitigate things and help detect. and we deploy in our different strike teams and do different things. But it's up to us to make sure that the ongoing training is there, because there is some, but a lot of it's computer-based. And so we are stacked. I have my personal, in fact, I have 2 sets because I'm also in the Federal Incident Support Team, IST. We have full respirator masks. I have full face otherwise, just on the air pockets, pads. We can do full tank, different respirators of the different sorts. It's up to us. And then we have the full N95 as well. So the training's there. Could it be better? I think so. Any other thoughts on that? Well, thank you for everything. Appreciate it.
Again, thank you.